Alright guys, so today we're going to learn about natural selection. So make sure that you're writing these in your journal and you're taking some C notes, and I'll guide you along on what you really need to write and what you don't throughout this flip video. Okay, so when we talk about natural selection, it's changing in the environment. Now we know traits from genetics are physical characteristics. They can accumulate in a population through the process called natural selection. So today we did a lab with the mice and their genetics, and you should clearly have been able to see how the environment can also help and favor and disfavor particular traits. So the actual definition of natural selection, and you definitely need to write this down, is the process by which individuals with favorable traits survive and reproduce. Now remember, the whole entire goal of organisms in the wild is to live long enough to reproduce, to pass on their genetic material. These traits make an organism better adapted to its environment. So natural selection leads to the process of adaptation. Okay? So when we talk about natural selection, we have to talk about Darwin's theory of natural selection. His theory was that can be described in 4 basic steps: overpopulation, genetic variation, survival, and successful reproduction. So we're going to talk about all 4 of these a little bit more in detail. So overpopulation, and you don't need to write all of this, just get the main gist. An overpopulation is when organisms often have more offspring than can survive long enough to become adults. So that is one of the things that many smaller species do, like frogs and sea turtles. They produce many, many offspring. This way, at least a few of them will become an adult and live long enough for them themselves to reproduce and pass on their genetic material. So one way that animals overcompensate for natural selection is they produce a high number of offspring, knowing that many of them will not survive. So genetic variation. No 2 individuals in a population are exactly alike if we're talking sexual reproduction. Every individual has its own combination of traits. Some traits might help improve the chance of survival, while other traits might lower the chance of survival. So here's the definition for adaptation, and I definitely want you to write this down. Adaptation are traits that improve the chance of survival and reproduction. If an organism has a particular trait that is adapted to the environment, it helps that organism to survive. It could be like we talked about earlier. It could be to live longer, to get better resources, to camouflage, to hide, to seek out food better. Whatever it is, it improves their chance of survival. So an example could be white fur rabbits in the snow is useful for camouflage while they will stand out in a forest. So if a rabbit has white fur, kind of like in today's lab that we did with the mice, how white definitely blends into the white sand, and the brown mice help to blend into the forest floor. So that kind of shows how the environment can help to improve a particular trait. The third thing in Darwin's theory was the struggle to survive. Individuals in a population must compete for all available resources like food, water, living space, mates, all that. So the overall survival of the fittest. And then the fourth one was successful reproduction. Like we said, of course, that is everybody's ultimate goal. Organisms must reproduce to pass on their genes to the next generation. To reproduce, not only do you have to survive, but you also have to find a mate. Now, write this one down. Individuals that are better suited to an environment are more likely to pass on their traits. Individuals who are not suited are less likely, and they will die and have few offspring. So definitely just write this one right here in the middle. That's the only one you need to write down. All right, so hereditary and environment. We've kind of already talked about hereditary. Both genes and the environment play a big part in the appearance and the behavior of all living things. So you might have gotten your blue eyes from your father. Okay, but you didn't get your personality from your father. Your personality was something that the environment influenced. So you are partly who you are because of your genes, but also because of your environment, how you were raised. Like the way my accent is from being raised in East Texas. Even though I've lived with my parents, my parents don't have that strong of an East Texas accent because they weren't born and raised here like I was. So another example could be like fur color or temperature. Arctic foxes, their coats actually change color throughout the year. During the summer, the fox's coat is grayish brown because of the pigment to help it blend in to the forest floor. And during the winter, the fox's coat turns white during cold temperatures to help it to blend into the snow. So this is an example of how the genes are affected by the environment. Another example could be hydrangeas. Hydrangeas are actually the pH indicator. Their color of their flowers change based on the acidity of the soil. Pretty much in hydrangea plants, if you see a blue or purple hydrangea, that means the soil is very basic, meaning it's not an acid, it's alkaline. If you see pink hydrangeas, that means the soil is very acidic. So if you have a hydrangea plant and your parents want or your mom wants to have pink flowers, just, pour some lemon juice around it in the soil to make it more acidic. If you want purple, then you can add some aspirin to the soil to help it more basic. So even though both plants are hydrangeas, they don't actually have a genotype to determine what color they are because the environment, the acidity of the soil, can influence that. Okay, so if you need to rewind, go back. Just the main gist is I want you to understand what natural selection and adaptation are and how the environment can influence us as individuals. Okay, see you tomorrow.